Let's get started. I've got a minute or two after 9. So welcome to our rental forum today. I'm Monica Staff, the General Counsel for the Rhode Island Association of Realtors and statewide MLS, and I will be your moderator today. So I have the easy part because we've got some great panelists who have a lot of good content for you. I may repeat one of these announcements as more people join us, but just as a reminder, I think most of you know the drill, but this is a Zoom webinar. So if you do have any questions for our panelists, use the Q&A function that you'll see depending on what device you have. That'll either be at the bottom of your screen or top of your screen. So use that instead of chat. You can put in any kind of questions that you have for them. And then also if someone else asks a question that you were thinking of asking, you can upvote that. It's a little thumbs up on your Q&A. So we will do our best to get your questions answered. There will be a recording of the program that will be available early next week, and I'll post that link in chat if you want to watch it again or want to share it with anybody who maybe missed the program today. And I think that is all I have for announcements. So let me just mention to you who our fantastic panelists are today. So we've got Jason Flanders, the Senior Compliance Officer for the Rhode Island Commission for Human Rights. We'll be talking about the new Section 8 law and how it protects anyone with a lawful source of income. We also have Claribel Shavers, who is Rhode Island's Housing Director, Rhode Island Housing's Director of Leased Housing and Rental Services. So she has direct oversight over various rental assistance programs, including the Housing Choice Voucher Program and asset management of Rhode Island Housing's multiple family portfolio. And then finally, we'll hear from Sandi Warner, Esquire. Sandi is the broker owner of Warner Realty Group in Newport. She's also an attorney with experience in landlord tenant law. Warner Realty Group has a large and busy rental practice focused in general in Newport County. And Sandi will be speaking to you from the property manager's perspective. All right, so like I said, feel free to put any questions at any time in the FAQ function, and we'll get to your questions after all the panelists have had a chance to speak. So Jason, would you like to kick us off and tell us what happened on April 15th?
So my name is Jason Flanders. I am actually, as of May 17th, the Fair Housing Director for the Commission for Human Rights. Angie Lovegrove, who was there for 20 some odd years, is retired. Preceded but not replaced. We're not going to be able to replace her. So April 15th, 2021, the governor signed into law an amendment to the Fair Housing Practices Act, which includes legal source of income as a protection under the laws that the commission covers. The commission is the state agency which enforces both state and federal anti-discrimination law. We deal with housing, obviously employment, credit and lending, and also public accommodations. So the new law states that it is illegal to deny rental to somebody based on their legal source of income. Would be Section 8, which is the big one, alimony, Social Security, or any other legal source of income. So if a landlord, that's not the way I want to phrase it. If someone is applying for housing, a landlord cannot ask them pointedly if they have Section 8. They can ask them if they have a legal source of income, and they can also ask the amount and the duration, but they can't ask specifically about Section 8. And the way I always liken that is you change it to, instead of saying, well, you can't ask about Section 8, ask about race. You can't ask somebody pointedly, are you a specific race, or are you pregnant, or something to that effect. But they can get any legally obtained information that they need. I think the best example is actually age. If you think about like an employment application, they can't ask you your age, but they can ask, are you old enough to work in the United States? Are you 18 or over? So there's certain ways that you have to ask the question in order not to run afoul of the law. It's illegal to designate certain units, or if you have multiple buildings, certain buildings or wings of a building. That would fall under what we call discriminatory terms and conditions. You have to treat individuals with Section 8 and other legal sources of income the same as any other tenant that you would. So you can't designate certain units for them, or certain floors, or certain wings of a building, all of the units that would be available to anybody else has to be available to individuals who are now covered under this law. Another discriminatory term and condition would be, okay. There was a question that we saw about the calculating the amount of rent. So if a landlord requires 3 times this, the source of income, your income to be 3 times the amount of rent, they can only count the portion that is being paid by the person. The total amount, the amount from the voucher does not count towards that. So they can only take in consideration whatever the percentage that the tenant is going to be paying. You cannot put them through different qualification standards. So for example, if you don't ask for criminal backgrounds, this is what I blanked on for a second. You can't ask anybody who has Section 8 or whatever to do a criminal background check if you don't ask other tenants that as well. Because now you're setting another discriminatory term and condition and adding an additional barrier or test or what have you to actually getting the unit. So again, you have the point of the law is you have to treat anybody who has Section 8 or alimony or Social Security the same as anybody else. That's the same as somebody else who's working a job. I mean, those are pretty much the big things. The commission, what we do is we investigate those cases. So we don't advocate, we're not an advocacy group, we're a neutral investigating agency. So what we would do is we would take the cases in and investigate whether or not there is a violation of that law, and if there is, then we enforce that violation. I would like to say if you have any questions, because that's really pretty much it with the Section 8 for me, is the discriminatory terms and conditions and the denial of rental, because I believe those were what the law was really about. So I'm going to turn it over, and definitely did not take my whole 15 minutes.
It is quite all right, Jason. The questions are already pouring in for you, so we will keep you busy this after everyone's had a chance to speak. And congratulations on your new position at the Rhode Island Commission for Human Rights.
Thank you.
So, okay. Why don't we move on to Claribel Shavers? And she is one of the boots on the ground people who really knows the program inside and out. So she'll be able to answer a lot of questions too, we hope, later on. Claribel, take it away, please.
Thank you, Monica. Oh, can you hear me? There's some background noise.
Yep,
Okay.
we hear you.
Okay. So thank you for inviting me on behalf of Rhode Island Housing today to talk about our wonderful Housing Choice Voucher Program and how source of income will impact what we do. So I'll start giving a little background on how the Housing Choice Voucher Program works and how landlords can get involved in the process. And then I'll talk a little bit about the source of income and the benefits and how it could hopefully help us. So the Housing Choice Voucher Program, which is commonly known by most as Section 8, it's a federal government program that helps low-income families rent safe, healthy, and affordable homes by paying some, and in some cases, all of their rent and utilities. It's usually administered by Public Housing Authority, and it makes it possible for families, low-income families, to rent in the private market. Rhode Island Housing, we here serve as the Public Housing Authority for 19 communities in Rhode Island. So the way it works is a family usually applies, they get put on the wait list, then they get picked and then get issued a voucher. Then the family goes out, they look for a unit that meets their needs, based on bedroom size and location. But the owner also has to agree to rent to them, which again has been quite a challenge, and we're hoping that the source of income will improve that. In the program, the tenant typically pays between we try for the families to only pay 30% of their income for rents and utilities, and it's actually their adjusted income. One thing that it came up, and I know Jason mentioned it, it's about the income test that some landlords ask for to make sure that the income is enough, it is 3 times the rent. What I would say about that is that for us, for our families, technically you don't have to do that. We verify families' income. We make sure that the families can afford the unit that they're going into. We base that their portion is always going to be a 30% of their adjusted income. So technically, you really, as a landlord, don't have to request and verify income, and don't need to make sure that it's 3 times the rent. again, because we're doing that and we're incorporating, whatever the landlord is asking for, and there's negotiations that's happening before a contract is signed. So again, the rent is based on their income. In some cases, we could allow for the families to pay more than 30%, and I'll talk more about that later. So how the rent is calculated and how we come up with an agreement. There's two tests for approving rents. One is that the rents cannot be what we call have to be reasonable rents. In other words, that they have to be market rents. So if the local market 2 bedrooms go for 500, then you can't come in and ask for 1,000 for a 1 bedroom because the market is only now for a certain amount. In addition to the rents have to be within market, or what we call reasonable, they cannot be above our payment standards. And I'll go into what the payment standards are too in a bit. It's up to the owner to ask for what they want for the rent. Again, as an owner or landlord or realtor, you probably do an analysis, what the market can allow. So you'll ask for whatever it is that you feel the market or the market rent is. And then we'll make sure that it's reasonable. If we find that the rents are not reasonable in that area, then unfortunately a tenant will not be able to rent that unit with the voucher. Now, how we set our payment standards. The payment standards are based on HUD's fair market rents, and they update these fair market rents on a yearly basis. At Rhode Island Housing, we do 110% of what we call the small area fair market rents to try to get more landlords to participate in the program. You can find these amounts, and we have a table on our website. We have a dedicated landlord page, and we've got a list of the location, the cities and towns, and how much the maximum payment standards are for each of these areas. The landlords can't not charge more than the payment standard. However, if it happens that the payment standard is below the market rent, or what we call reasonable, there is an allowance of 10%. Well, let's put it this way. The family's allowed to pay the difference as long as they're not paying more than 40% of their adjusted income towards this rent. And if that is the case, and if we do agree that we're going to pay you more than our payment standard, that actual amount has to be, on one lease. So you're not allowed to have 2 separate leases. One that says, well, this is a payment standard, and then another one for the tenant to pay the difference. No, it just has to be an agreed upon amount. You sign one lease, and then we do the analysis to make sure that the family is not too heavily burdened, which means that they're not paying more than 40%. So in some cases, again, they could pay a little bit above payment standard as long as the families are not heavily burned. Now, when it comes to screening, landlords are encouraged to screen tenants with vouchers as they would, like Jason said before, as they would somebody else without a voucher. And that includes credit history, references, felony convictions. So they can do all of that. But again, if they do it for them, they have to do it for everyone that they are qualifying for their units. Like I mentioned before, they could verify income. However, because the PHA, a major part of our work is to make sure that the family they're not paying too much rent. We do a lot of that calculating, we do a lot of that verification, and we require the families to report to us any income changes during the year, and we do it at least annually for the families. But we do want to remind landlords that it is illegal to discriminate against any tenant due to race, ethnicity, sex, gender, marital status, presence of children, or disability. So when it comes to inspections, all units have to be inspected by us before a tenant can move in. So, but after the initial inspection, we do not do an inspection. It's every 2 years is when we do inspection, unless there's a special request done by either a tenant or landlord for us to come in. What we do is we inspect to make sure that the unit is safe, sanitary, and up to code. And these codes are based on state and local city codes. And I know this question came up about lead. We do ask that the landlord has to comply with the state lead law. And I believe we do ask for a lead certificate if it's applicable. And this is all per state requirements. We do offer the option of pre-inspection. And what this means is that pre-inspection, a tenant does not have to identify a unit. So if a landlord's interested in the program, they just want to see, okay, what is it that I have to prepare for when I actually do get a tenant that is interested in what am I have to prepare. We offer our inspector to go out doing pre-inspection and go over how the housing quality standard works. So it's not an official inspection. It's just kind of an educational process to tell the landlords how to prepare for the housing quality. And maybe, if they are interested in a tenant does come into, it's interested in the unit, now they know what it is that they need to do to repair to make it ready for that family. but a housing quality standard official inspection still has to take place before we execute a leasing contract. When it comes to evictions, landlords have a right, like they would with anyone without a voucher, to evict a family. But of course, it has to be in accordance with state and local laws. It's extremely unlikely. It is extremely rare that our voucher families are evicted, but it does happen. We do encourage our landlords to contact us if they're having issues with the family, so we can see if there's any ways that we can mitigate and try to, help and resolve some of the issues. There's quite a few benefits to participating in the program. It gives you peace of mind knowing that Rhode Island Housing's portion will always be paid, of course, as long as the landlord is keeping the unit up to safe and sanitary, as we mentioned before. And also, if a tenant loses all or part of their income, like many families during COVID, we'll adjust the rent that the tenant owes, so it'll probably reduce and we'll pay more. So this makes sure that the landlord always receives the full amount of rent. And it also ensures that the tenant's always paying between that 30 or 40% of their adjusted income. In addition, if you have a vacant, you don't have to worry about finding a family for your units because we have such a high demand in the program, and we have such a demand in the families. Families are always looking. There's always families that we have looking for housing, so you will always refer families that are ready to lease a unit for you. Now, if you're interested in becoming a landlord, I'll briefly explain how the process works. So basically, first, the family, they get the voucher, they find the unit, they identify the unit. The landlord then completes, and the tenant completes what we call a request for tenancy approval, and that's where we ask you for the rent that you're charging for the unit, and we'll ask you some other information. We'll also ask for verification that you own the property, and we'll probably ask you for bank information because we do our payments direct deposit. So once all that information is returned back to us, Rhode Island Housing will schedule inspection. Once a unit passes inspection and we negotiate, we agree on rent, Rhode Island Housing and the landlord signs what we call a housing assistance payment contract. And at the same time, the family and the landlord sign a lease. The initial lease does have to be a minimum of 12 months. So what this means is that every party, landlord, tenant, Rhode Island Housing has roles and responsibilities in this program. The role of the landlord is to make sure that the unit is safe, decent, safe, and sanitary, and that the unit passes the program inspection, initial and any subsequent inspections. And a landlord, whatever services they agree to as part of the lease, like utilities or any amenities, they have to make sure that they provide those services. The tenants have to comply with the lease as well in the program requirements. They have to make sure they pay their rent on time, like any other tenant without a voucher, maintain the unit in good condition. And they also have to notify us of any changes in their income or family composition. Rhode Island Housing's role is to make sure we issue timely payments to our landlords. We also obviously are responsible for administering the whole program, but we also make sure that both the tenant and landlord are meeting the obligations. And if not, we do have a right to terminate assistance. We also have to make sure that we re-examine the family's income at least annually. It could happen more if the family's income is fluctuating throughout the year. Right now, Rhode Island Housing is offering incentives because, of course, we want more landlords to participate in the program. We have an incentive payment for new landlords of $2,000. So if they have a new unit, they want to participate, we have an incentive fee of $2,000. If they have an additional unit, it's $500 per additional unit. If you're an existing current landlord and you want to lease another unit with us, we'll provide another incentive of $500. As mentioned before, we provide an option to have your unit pre-inspected. We also have an improvement fund of up to $2,000 for repairs, and this could be used after tenant vacates, but it also could be used like if you during initial inspection, there's repairs that need to be done, we could probably reimburse you for some of these expenses. We also offer a free pain remediation for landlords, and we also offer secure deposit assistance. So we will pay for secure deposit on behalf of these families. So now talk about the topic of the day is the source of income bill and how that impacts us in our program. But before doing so, I'd like to go over some data with you. Bottom line, in most cases, most families have to wait 5 years, if not more, to get a voucher. Our success rate here at Rhode Island Housing is 14%. What that means is out of 100 vouchers that we put out, only 14 successfully lease a voucher. That means 86 families are unable to lease and unfortunately lose the opportunity, have to reapply at some point and probably wait another 5 years, if not more. According to a study that was done by the South Coast Fair Housing in 2019, they found that 80% of apartments that are within the financial reach of the voucher holder, meaning that because they have a voucher, they can't afford to rent that apartment. 80% of these were made unavailable to the families, simply because the landlords will not accept a tenant with this type of rental assistance. So with that said, we're hoping and expecting that the source of income will level the playing field and make it easier for our families. So thank you. That is it for me for now. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that information. I see more questions are coming in the Q&A. And before we turn to our final presenter, Sandi Warner, let me just make a couple of quick announcements / reminders for any of you who might have joined us a little bit late. Because this is a Zoom webinar, the best way to ask a question is going to be in the Q&A function rather than chat. So if you see a Q&A at the bottom of your screen or top of your screen, depending what device you have, you'll see some other questions folks have already typed in there, and we'll hold those till after Sandi's presentation and ask those other presenters. Also, just wanted to let you know, unfortunately, as the host, I can't start my own questions. So I've kind of hijacked on some other people's questions in the Q&A. But what I've done is I've included a few links. Some of you have already asked, how can I watch this? Because there's so much information. How can I watch this again? So there will be a recording. If you go through your Q&A, you'll see the link for that. And that will be posted sometime early next week. Also, as Claribel was talking, and I hope I included the correct link, but I did include a link in the Q&A about Rhode Island Housing, the Housing Choice Voucher Program, and resources for landlords. And you'll find some frequently asked questions in there and more information about the incentive. So if there's anything I missed, Claribel, that you'd like us to send out, we should be able to send to everybody who attended today, any other resources that I may have missed. And then finally, I've also included a link. You may have already seen this a couple of weeks ago, but I have included a link to RIHousing.org, and there is an article about this law on there that we posted right after the law went into effect. And that includes a link to the actual law for any of you who want to see it, or you have an attorney, or if you're a property manager who want to read the actual text of the new law, that's there. And I think that is all I have for announcements for now, but please keep typing in your questions and we'll do everything we can to get them answered. All right, Sandi, I've hijacked enough of your time, so we are on to Sandi Warner, speaking from the property manager's perspective. Thanks, Sandi. Take it away.
Thank you. Good morning. I thought that the most useful thing I could do is share our practical experience, how all of these pieces fit together when we're actually working with tenants. And so I made a little presentation just to keep me on track and how the process works. Oh, let me just go back to the beginning. Okay, so this is just who I am. We have a mix of a little over 300 actual doors, and so do a lot of rentals. We currently are running 20 to 30, and it mixes Section 8 leases. We have a mix. We have families, we have singles, we have elderly, we have some VA that came through us through Operation Stand Up. And we mostly work with Newport Housing, although are starting to work a little more with Rhode Island Housing. So the first step in the process that Claribel just mentioned is the request for tenancy approval. Generally, when we're showing apartments, in Newport, we do a lot of rentals, and I know other areas in the state do. The request for tenancy comes up very early, usually when we're getting a phone call. They're telling us they have Section 8. What doesn't often happen is the tenant very rarely has their request for approval, or they don't know how to fill it out, or they don't bring it to you. So you got to really be on this if you're you want to have this tenant. Many of them don't understand the process. In our experience, when we have completed a request for tenancy approval and sent it to the caseworker, because we do have a good relationship with Rhode Island Housing, we've been told that the caseworker can't start until they've spoken to the tenant. And in many, many cases, the tenant does not reach out for a week or 2 weeks. And this becomes a potential problem for the landlord because you're running into possible vacancies because the clock has not started ticking yet. The approval is about 30 days from the receipt from the tenancy, the request for tenancy. And there's actual documents. This is the site on the HUD.gov site. And this is what that document looks like. It's really very simple to fill out. The next step, in our experience, we wait for them to approve our rent to get everything going again. The landlord sets the rent, and it's usually your market rates, as Claribel said. And then the local housing office can let you know what their rates are too. If, you know, maybe you've got a unit and you're open, you only have one and you always rent to Section 8, you could probably check in with them and see what their rates are. They may say that yours is too high, but in our experience, they've always accepted it if it's within the parameters. Those rent rates include utilities. In Newport, any other agents who are in Newport know that that can be a real problem because water is the most expensive utility, and the best tenant in the world does not tell you when their toilet's running, and they don't tell you when the sink is running, and then all of a sudden you've got a $500 or $600 water bill. And of course, we don't go in and inspect their bathrooms and their kitchen sinks on a daily basis. So we work with Newport Housing because we've been doing this for a long time. We do not include utilities. So they work out what averages are for the utilities. There's a way to do that to protect you, because obviously if you're paying $500 a month in utilities, that offsets what you would normally get, and it makes it less attractive for you as a landlord. The home inspection comes after, you know, they've got their request for tenancy, you've been calling. You as the landlord stay on the caseworker. Call, because that clock is ticking and you're going to end up with a vacant month, because if you've got somebody, maybe they're working 3 jobs or they've got multiple kids, they're not calling that caseworker every day. And you're going to find, okay, you know, hey, it was vacant June 1, but we're still now 30 days out with housing. So now you're going to lose 30 days, 60 days. You've got to stay on it. Home inspection in Newport, we've had some issues trying to coordinate those. Sometimes we've had more than one no-show at an inspection, not us, the housing inspector. Also in Newport, there's no coverage. So if the inspector's away, you wait. So for Claribel and Jason, that's a problem for landlords because you've got that 30-day timing issue. Rhode Island Housing now has an in-house inspector who we've had a good experience with so far. Very helpful, he's quick, shows up, and he can help direct you if things are, if you need to know who to talk to next. This is the list that I got from the HUD site. And I also have a link I can share with you that's the checklist that you as the landlord can have and know. Honestly, this is really basic stuff. It's all the things that should work in a house. They are not, they're not really challenging. One of the things we did find is Rhode Island Housing and HUD do not require closets for a room to be a bedroom. So particularly in Newport, where some of these houses are so weirdly chopped up, you've got rooms that have ended up being bedrooms. Housing's not going to ding you on it not having a closet. So I hear that a lot. People ask me like, well, can it be? If it's a reasonable room and it's safe and it's got if it's got a egress and it's not going to trap somebody in a fire, and it makes sense, and you go in and you go, oh, it's a bedroom. Oh, wait a minute, it's not a bedroom because it doesn't have a closet. That's never happened to us. So lead is the big one. Smoke detectors, which of course we all want anyway, because we want all of our tenants to be safe. Once you pass the home inspection, it's a pass-fail right then, unless you're waiting for a lead test. Then you write the lease. It's your own lease. It's the landlord's lease. And then you sign the landlord's lease, and then you sign the housing assistance payment contract. Hopefully by then you've already given housing your bank information because it's automatic deposits. Just a pro tip, we get security deposits before we start this process at all. I think that's a good practice for all renters, and I imagine most agents do that. It is just as important in a Section 8 lease because you need to know right away, because what happens, I do know that housing will help them with a lease, but so you say, okay, great, we're going to take you, let's get your request for tenancy in, give me a deposit. Well, I'll bring it to you tomorrow. Okay, wait until that deposit comes to you. More than one occasion has happened, because I do help landlords in the area where they get told for 30 days, 45 days, I'm bringing the deposit, I'm bringing the deposit. Now everything's ready to go and the landlord's stuck because you've got the rent from housing, you still have no deposit. You either take that tenant and hope the tenant, try to work out something that you're building that deposit as you go, or you're going to have to work something out with housing. So be smart about your process, just like you are with anybody. Remember, if you take that security deposit in advance, it does have to be returned if the tenant decides not to go forward. So timing is critical. Think about your vacancy. Think about when you want that next tenant in, and be careful. Caseworkers are helpful. Be proactive, make relationships with those caseworkers. They will help you. They are working with a lot of people. If you're calling up and biting their heads off and being a jerk, they're not going to be motivated to help you. However, in our experience, 99% of tenants do not help themselves to move that contract along. It's about a 30 to 60 day process. So again, timing. Do not just think that somebody's moving this through the process for you. It's not. You're going to end up vacant when you don't want to be. Lease renewal versus recertification. Tenants don't understand the difference between these two words. So if you understand it, you'll understand when they're saying to you, oh, I'm getting recertified, they'll call it a new lease. A lease renewal is, address it in your lease just like you would any other time. Annual increases are expected by housing and usually approved if they're not unreasonable. Recertification, Claribel touched on that. That's between the tenant and the state and does not always necessarily coincide with lease renewal. So you could have a tenant that's got a lease in February and they're getting recertified in November. So if they're saying something about a lease renewal that's not making sense to you, it might be this. So maybe have a chat with their caseworker and just make sure that you understand what's going on. We have 2 or 3 Section 8 tenants that we've had for close to a decade. Recertifications happen over time. One lady started with a 4-bedroom. She had multiple kids. They've grown and gone on. She's now in a 1-bedroom. We have enough properties. We sort of moved her along as she went. So a voucher can go from a 3-bedroom to a 2-bedroom. It can go from a 2-bedroom to a 4-bedroom. I've seen a voucher that's a 1-bedroom go to a 2-bedroom when someone has medical necessity and might need a caretaker or extra space. So my pro tips are timing is everything. If your property is vacant and you're looking for someone to move in tomorrow and you're not already inspected, a Section 8 tenant might not work for your timing. If you have no cash, do not invest any time. As with any rental, do not begin this process without a security deposit in hand. Basic habitability. People are so nervous about the inspection. If your property is reasonably well managed, you'll pass inspections with minor fixes. We get dinged sometimes on neutral or double neutral outlets, cracked outlet plates, windows that don't open and close, window locks that don't work. Think about safety. If this is something that you don't want your family in, you don't want somebody else's family in there either. You need them safe and you need them to be able to get in and out and live safely. Lead, Rhode Island is a lead safe state. We all know that. It is more important in government housing, obviously, because the government has a greater liability and a greater desire to prevent that. Lead is really, really, really bad for kids. It's proven to be devastating to children's development. So it's important to do it under any circumstances. You're going to be required to under Rhode Island. It was great to hear that, Claribel, that you guys have funds that can help landlords, because really, guys, it's not that hard. It's just time and money. Cultivate relationships in your housing office. We are not above taking cupcakes over on Christmas. They work really hard for us, and we try to be good to them. And reasonable rent increases that reflect changing market rates are usually approved. So I think that's my last. These were the FAQs that Monica sent over to me. I think I already answered them. I said, how are inspections? They're usually quick. Once you get the appointment, make sure you address the items on the list. You'll get a pass fail on the spot, usually, unless they're waiting for a lead test. Payments are deposited automatically. Holidays can delay by a day. We've never had a problem with payments. The HUD does not write the lease, or HUD or Rhode Island Housing or the PHA does not write the lease, the landlord does. Be specific in your lease. I personally would not use the RIHousing standard lease. You know, if you've been leasing, you know what the issues are. They should go in every lease. If the tenant doesn't pay rent, you'll get the state portion, and the tenant is liable under the state eviction law under the exact same process. So get your notice out on the 16th day. If you haven't resolved it by then, you should be talking to your caseworker at the same time. They may be able to solve it. Something might be going on, but you have every right under Rhode Island law to evict that Section 8 tenant. We have done it. They are represented by Rhode Island Legal Services. It is rare. It's I think we've only done 1 or 2 over years. If the tenant violates the lease, noise, smoke, damage, extra occupants, housing offices do try to assist. We have been told there's nothing they can do. It's the same rules as under a normal lease. That's why your lease needs to be robust, so that you have the same protections you would with any tenant. And I think that was it. I just did call up. These are what these documents look like, and they are all available. This is the best site that I found. This is HUD.gov/program_offices/public_Indian_housing/programs HCV landlord forms. They're all there. And this is what they look like. So I think this is the, oh, I wanted to show you the inspection form. I didn't know they had it. It's right here. And it's very straightforward. So if you're worried, go look at your inspection form. And of course, now they will go out and inspect you ahead of time. But I think that's all I had for you. Oh, just so the tenancy addendum, you can see there's not much in there. It's changes in the lease. This is the HUD request for tenancy approval. If your tenant doesn't have one, do yourself a favor, print one, get them in your office, get them to sign it, go over it and say, call your caseworker like right now so we can get in motion. And then I guess the HAP contract close. That's the housing assistant payment contract. So these are all available for you to see in advance if that is helpful to you. It's helpful to you as realtors or property managers to help your landlords. That's it.
Sandi, thanks very much. Before I start posing questions to all of you as panelists, we have had a couple of requests for your PowerPoint.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you'd be willing to... Okay, great.
I think you have it, Monica, if you want to send it out.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah. Yep. Okay, so everyone who's on here, we'll make sure to send you to forward the PowerPoint to you and any other resources or other speakers may have. Okay, and Sandi, if you want to stop sharing.
Oh, no.
Just so everyone can see us better. Okay, everyone, you have all been busy typing questions here, so I'll just go straight from the top. Some of these are directed to a particular panelist. Some, I think any of you might want to chime in on. So, all right, the first question, and I know, Jason, I think you indicated a couple of questions that you'd be willing to answer in the FAQs, so I'll give those to you. I'll just go in order though. All right, so first of all, thanks to all of our panelists for your presentations, really helpful information. So, all right, first question that I have is, if Section 8 does not pay the rent that the landlord is asking, can an applicant be denied on this basis?
I could take that one. Just to clarify, so you as a landlord, you're asking for, again, if you're, whatever you're asking for is market rent, most likely it's going to be between within our standards. But if you're asking for rent that's above market and would definitely be above our payment standard, then no, we won't allow the tenant to lease in that unit, and you could say that you could find someone else. But what you cannot do is ask for that higher rent from just our voucher family and then lower that rent to rent to somebody who's not a voucher holder.
Right, that falls under the discriminatory terms and conditions of rental. So yeah, the standards for somebody with Section 8 or other lawful sources of income has to be the exact same for anybody else.
So in other words, you can't set an artificially high rent just to discourage an applicant. It has to be the same rent you're promoting to everybody.
Right, so you
That's what I
can
got,
like
got it.
2,000 for Section 8, 1,000 for somebody who doesn't. That would be illegal under the laws that we cover.
Great. Okay, thank you. All right, next question. Boy, this is kind of a firing line here. We got a bunch of these. All right, can you ask for proof of income as we do with someone with a pay stub? So can you ask for any proof of income for a rental applicant?
Yes,
Who gets a voucher?
as long as you're asking it of everybody else, you can ask them to prove that they can afford the apartment. You can ask for the source of income, the amount of the income, and the duration that the income will be coming in. So you can ask for that, yes.
Okay, great. And anyone else, I don't want to go through these too fast. So if anyone else would like to jump in on and add to any of these answers, please feel free. Okay. All right, here's one. As a landlord, am I now required to get my units approved for Section 8? And when do I need to start that process? So does a person need to wait until he or she has an applicant with a voucher, or is there any benefit to having the unit approved now?
So this is, we just added we started doing these pre-inspections, which is totally optional, they're not required. But there's pre-inspections are not official, they're not formal. There's just, again, it's like educational purposes, but the actual Section 8, what we call housing quality standards, only happens when a family is interested in the unit and they come in, like Sandy mentioned, they bring their RFTA to the landlord and the landlord and tenant sign that RFTA. That's when the official process and the request for inspections begins.
Okay, great. All right, thanks. And one thing I meant to mention before, just, Claribel, Rhode Island Housing covers a number of towns and cities in Rhode Island. And you may have said that was at about 13 or so, Claribel?
I think we're at 19, I think.
Oh, great, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I apologize if you said that before. And some of the questions are things that you've already covered, but it doesn't hurt to kind of emphasize these. But so that's
a good point, Monica, that, everything I'm explaining in most cases it's related to Rhode Island Housing's policy. So if somebody is, leasing a unit in Cranston, there may be some policies that are different. So they want to definitely check, like Sandy mentioned, she works with Newport. There may be some differences in how the process works. So folks to keep that in mind.
Okay, great. And that might explain how in some cases Sandy has gotten some different results depending on whether it's Rhode Island Housing or Newport or some other town or city's housing authority. Mm-hmm. Okay, all right. So can you still require a credit verification from an applicant with a voucher, even though it's not required? So can you still run a credit check for an applicant with a voucher if you do that for everybody?
As long as you do it for everybody, then it's not considered discriminatory. Yeah, it's the treating everybody equally. So if it's something that you do for somebody who's not on a voucher, then yes, you can run that.
Okay, great, thank you. All right.
But I would
go ahead. Sorry.
It may be discriminatory. There are ways it could be discriminatory if that's the basis for the denial is the credit check. It's a very complicated part of the law. Something called adverse impact, where certain groups have statistically worse credit than others. But generally, yes, you can run that credit check for everybody.
Thanks, Jason. Oh, and one other quick announcement. I think, and I don't want to put you on the spot time-wise, Jason and Claribel, but I understand that you were working on your agencies are working on some frequently asked questions as well.
Yes, they're actually
About-
on our website, on the
Oh.
commission website, www.richr.ri.gov. If you go under I believe it's the news and information section, you'll see at the very top the new source of income housing protection FAQ.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. I'm glad I didn't put you on the spot because I knew it was in the works. Okay, I'll make sure and we'll see if we can do an email to everybody who attended today. And then I'll also post the information, links to both Rhode Island Housing's program and the Rhode Island Commission on Human Rights frequently asked questions. I'll post that on RIHousing.org as well.
Oh, no, I can email you the FAQ, the source of income one, if you like.
Sure, if you want to pop it in the chat, that'd be great. I mean, sorry, the FAQ. See if you're able to do it. You might have to hijack someone else's question, but to put in, I don't know if you're able to initiate your own.
Can they see the chat or just us? Excuse me. Here we go. So I put it in the chat. If you click
Okay.
on that.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Claribel, I think you covered this before. I think both Sandi and you covered this before, but why don't we, I think it's worth repeating since this may be new to some people. What is the process for requesting more than the payment standard? So I guess that would be more than a higher rent.
Mm-hmm. So the process, if it's an initial unit, the form, the request for tenancy approval is going to ask for what the rent that the landlord's asking for. So they have to put the rent in there. Once we get that form, we'll take a look at it and we do what we call a rent reasonableness test, which we look at market to see if it's within market. And at that point, we'll determine, okay, is this rent above market? That's one test. And then we'll look at our payment standard. So that's how that process begins. And if it is within, if it is above the payment standard, but less than the market rent, or between at least market or less, then we will do another analysis to see if the family can afford to pay more. But as long as they're not paying 40%. So that's when the process begins. The other one is when they're, you sign a lease for 1 year. After 1 year, you can come in and ask for a rent increase. And that typically happens in probably the same form that you would do for somebody without a voucher. You send a letter. But in this case, we ask you to send a letter to both the tenant and to the housing authority, in this case, Rhode Island Housing, to say you're looking for a rent increase. And then you give us the amount and we do a similar test to see whether that is possible to grant the rent increase or not.
Great. All right, and Claribel, we've got another one specifically for you, but anyone else is free to chime in if you like. So the question is, are you saying that landlords cannot charge what they want for rent? They can only charge what Section 8 states is the market value.
Okay, so actually, we're saying that the landlords is the one that has to determine what it is that they want to charge. It is up to them. We do not dictate to any landlord what it is they can charge. They can charge anything they want. Is when it comes to us, we do have to do a couple of tests, and we have to make sure it's within market. And then the second test, if it's within our payment standards.
Thanks. Again, I know that a couple of these are repeats, but I think it's worth doing that. Okay, and Jason, this is one specifically for you. Anyone else can chime in. Can you provide an example of the portion of income paid by the tenant rule?
Okay, so say the rent for the unit is $1,000, right? And the housing voucher pays 700 of that 1,000. So now you have the 300. That's the portion that's left. That's the portion that you use to calculate if they can afford twice the rent. So their income could be 600 if that's what your standard is. It wouldn't be the 2,000 that you would normally calculate. I hope that made sense. That's the best way I can describe it.
It did to me, but we'll see if we get any more questions.
Okay.
That's a good test. People are not shy about letting us know. So, all right. So Claribel, even though you've already spoken about, about having the rents reviewed and all of that. So let's say a landlord already has a lease with a tenant. I'm kind of rephrasing the question slightly with all due respect to the person who asked it. Let's say you already have a voucher holder who signed a lease with you or your client, and at some point you want to increase the rent. Are increases handled differently, or is it a similar process to having the rent approved?
So the rent increase is a little different from the initial process, because the initial process is more time consuming and there's more forms. The rent increase, which we try, and like Sandi mentioned before, sometimes it doesn't happen at the same time as a annual recertification of the family. We try to keep it all the same, but it doesn't necessarily happen. But it's, so once you execute a lease for the initial lease for 12 months of 1 year, you're not eligible for a rent increase during that term, which I think is typically the case either without a voucher. So after the 12 months, what we ask is that you give us, and I think we put this in our somewhere in the paperwork when we signed the lease with you or the contract, is we ask that you give us 60-day notice of a rent increase. And that gives us time to, do our analysis. You look at the family's income to make sure that they could afford their rent increase, because if not, then the family will be informed that they will have to get a voucher and look for another unit if they're not able to stay in that unit. I hope that makes sense.
It does. Sandi, did you have any experiences you wanted to add with that, or?
I would say the 60-day rule is that she's exactly right. We usually do 60 days out, but 30 days is Rhode Island state law unless they're elderly or over 62, not elderly. But I just think 60 days is a good rule of thumb for everything in leases. So we've always used that.
Okay, great. The next question is, does Rhode Island Housing 1099 the landlords?
Yes, and I'm not an accountant, because there's some, times in which, there's exclusions for 1099s, but we do 1099 most of our landlords.
Okay, great. All right, and we have another request. We have a request for the Rhode Island Housing website. I did put it in the FAQs earlier, but maybe I should, let me see if I can move it, post that in the chat, unless Claribel, you have a better one handy that you'd like to include.
No, it's the same, yeah, the one with the
Okay.
page, yeah.
Okay, I'll go back and post that one in the chat. All right. Okay, so this is about the term of the lease. So the question is, I just want to confirm what Claribel said. Section 8 HUD will only cover yearly rentals, 12 months or more, and not shorter term rentals.
Initial. So the initial term has to be for one year. And I believe after that, I believe most leases are state that it becomes a month to month. And at that point, it becomes a month to month, and you could, terminate within those 30 days.
Okay, great. All right. I think we're hitting a record of questions for panelists at one of these forums that we do. So you're doing a great job, all. All right, so this question, I think this is going to be for Jason, but what if a landlord does not want to go through the inspection approval process?
Refusal to go through the inspection approval process could be considered discriminatory. That's just, that is actually exactly how it's written on our FAQ. That denial of that inspection would be considered discriminatory.
Okay. One tip I wanted to mention to everybody is, if any of you are licensed in Massachusetts or Connecticut, both of those states have had very similar laws for a number of years now. And so, if you want to touch base with someone there, kind of see how things have worked. But yeah, they've gotten it down to a science. Sorry, but I had my cell phone silenced. All right, that was me. All right, so that was all right. So we have the answer to that. This one, oh, Jason, that looks like you got the same question twice. What if the landlord doesn't want to go through the inspection process? So I think we covered that one already. Okay. Let's go on to the next one. Oh, all right. And this is actually a testimonial, which is nice. Another someone I know who to be a seasoned property manager, Karen Ma, posted that although there has been a stigma with Section 8 tenants, I want to say I have had many Section 8 tenants over the years and have had a good experience with them. Karen, thanks for sharing that with us.
That's something else. Can I just elaborate a little bit on
Sure,
that?
please do.
That's a great comment. Thank you for that. Most discrimination comes from assumptions, or just from I hate to use the word ignorance, but it can be that as well, where certain stereotypes is the best word, where a group of people are seen as such and such. And there's a lot of misinformation about that, and that, that's what we wouldn't have a job if that was unfortunately not true. So yeah, people assume that Section 8 are going to be more damaging, or they're not going to respect the property because they're not paying the full rent, so they don't understand, the value of the property. Other ones that we have are like families with kids are going to be more destructive because kids are destructive. But I don't know about you, but I was in college and I've seen how destructive 20-year-olds can be, far more than any 10-year-old that I've ever seen. So discrimination comes from assumptions, and those are the assumptions that we're trying to get rid of, and that's what we're trying to do, is those stigmas that we're trying to eliminate right now.
Okay, thanks. All right, so this question is, all right, actually, I think you really covered this, but I think it's important to share the question with the group. And Jason, I think you'd probably be the best to respond to this one. Are any of you actually involved in the field now or ever been involved with Section 8 tenants as landlords or realtors? If not, what makes you confident that there is discrimination based on voucher holders only? I believe this new law is putting a large bandage on the real problem. It is a feel-good law for organizations and politicians that does zero to help individuals seeking housing. You want me to tell you the real problem, how the law should read and how to begin to solve the problems. Landlords are not the problems, tenants with Section 8 are not the problems. Okay, so I don't know if anyone would like to address any of those comments.
I mean, South Coast Fair Housing came out with a study that showed that this was a problem. So there is data out there that supports the conclusion that there is quite a bit of discrimination based on Section 8, especially Section 8. I know, working at the commission for the past 16 years, we have taken numerous calls where individuals say, I've been denied an apartment because I have a Section 8 voucher, and we were never allowed to take that case in. So it is a big problem. It's not the only problem that we have, obviously. We cover 13, 14 protected categories. Clearly, it's not the only problem, but it is a problem that needs to be solved. That doesn't mean that there aren't other problems that also need to be solved, and maybe more laws could be instituted, but this is definitely a problem in the state, and we have the data to support that.
I think, and also if you heard the numbers that Claribel shared earlier, I mean, at Rhode Island Housing, which seems to have an effectively run program, only 14% of all the vouchers that are approved, only 14% of those applicants can actually find housing.
Mhm.
So that does sound like a big problem. And issues like that are what lead to laws. If it's not happening in the private sector, then that's when the government tends to step in.
Right.
Okay, here's one. This is a different twist. Is there a law against renting to family members if they have a Section 8 voucher?
Yeah, there is a restriction in our program that if you're, if we could, it's have the RTA will mention it, that if you're a parent, I forgot what the other relationship, husband, spouse, you can't rent to your son, daughter, or spouse under the program. There is some limitations. I don't know exactly the language, but there is some limitations with renting to relatives.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, let's see. And actually, I see we're just hitting time. We're hitting 10 o'clock, which is when the program was supposed to end. Panelists, I don't know, if you need to leave at 10, since I completely understand. If you've got a couple more minutes to answer some questions, we'd love it, but it's entirely up to you and what your schedule is like today.
I'm good.
I'm good to stay.
Sandi, are you good as well? Or
I actually do have to go. I have my second vaccine today.
oh, okay.
So I've got to run for that. But you have the PowerPoint. I'm happy to answer any questions from the property manager point of view. And have a great day, everybody.
Sandy.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sandi.
My pleasure, Monica.
Okay, why don't we just take a few more questions here, and then we can work anything that we don't get to, because I don't want to take advantage of Claribel's and Jason's time either. But if we don't get to everything, we can follow up with more resources to you and get those answers separately. Okay, so one question is, shouldn't the Section 8 tenant be responsible to have all of the paperwork available when they apply for a unit? The landlord's losing rent if they have to wait weeks for the tenants to obtain this information.
I can answer that. When we brief the families and we issue the voucher, we do let the tenant know that it is their responsibility to make sure that they have the paperwork. I think what Sandi, gave folks as a tip is to, because a lot of, and as often as we go out, we do a briefing, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of paperwork, it's a lot of information that HUD wants us to give to the families. So by the time we give that information to them and they actually find a unit, it can take a couple of weeks. They just lose track of what is needed and what is not needed. So I think what Sandi's tip is to get involved, make sure that the tenant actually does their portion, and and to some level also help them in the process and educate them. But ultimately, it is their responsibility. When we ask and when we work through the process and we ask for updates, we're asking the tenant, not the landlord. We're asking the tenant to see where the paperwork is, and ultimately they're the ones in the program, not the landlord. So
let me chime on this one too. For any of you who are listening who might also do sales, have you ever had to chase the buyer to get the buyer to apply for a mortgage or get pre-approved? Or chase the buyer to call a home inspector for a home inspection? That's just, it's human nature. Your experience with this, should it be your job? No, but if you want to get this done quickly, I think that what Claribel and Sandi said are good tips to follow. Why don't we just take a couple more questions here? I think a lot of these are, let's see what ones we haven't covered already. Why don't we jump to a couple of questions about the exemption for certain owner-occupied properties?
Yeah. So with the source of income law, if it's three units or less and owner occupied, then it's exempt from this part of the law. And that's it. I don't believe there's any carve-outs for if they use realtors or what have you. There's other parts of our law that do, but with this one, it's just 3 units or less, owner occupied, then it's exempt from this portion of the law.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think sometimes what happens is there's some confusion in general, not just with this new law, but about if the property owner has an exemption, like say an owner occupied to family and families with children, for example. It doesn't, I mean, they can't, can anyone use discriminatory advertising, realtor or that property owner?
No discriminatory advertising. Never. But you can, but with this law, it's just you're exempt from being held liable if you deny, but you still, discriminatory advertising is always discriminatory. It's always illegal.
Okay, great. And let me just scroll down to, if any of you see any that you'd like to address. I'm not trying to give everyone else's question short shrift. I definitely see some duplications. Let's take a couple more new ones. And thank you so much for bearing with us. Does Section 8 determine the number of bedrooms that a family must search for? For example, go ahead, Claribel.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, yes, we do. And that we base that on the household composition. And then we also have an admin plan that determines what we call occupancy standards. So, family of 1 is only eligible to lease a 1 or studio. Depends on how many people in the families we determine the bedroom size. Yes.
Okay, great. Let's just scroll a couple more.
Yeah, there was one question that I saw that I'd like to address, because
please go right ahead.
A question that comes out pretty often when you're talking about, what if you have 2 qualified applicants and one has Section 8, one doesn't? The fear that if you deny the person with Section 8 that you're going to have a charge filed against you, how do you determine that? My first thought is change the term Section 8 to black, or change it to something else. Is your thought process going to be the same? The unfortunate part is that if they feel they're discriminated against, they can file with the commission, but that doesn't mean you did anything wrong. As long as you had a legitimate non-discriminatory reason, if you didn't use the Section 8 voucher as the basis for the denial, we will investigate that. And if you did not do anything wrong, then you don't have to worry about it. Yes, it's a tough process to go through, to have the commission investigate you and ask you for this information. It's never good to have the government investigating you for a potential violation of the law, but as long as your denial wasn't based on the Section 8 voucher, it wasn't based on the lawful source of income, we can't prevent them from filing. But if you won't get dinged, you won't have anything happen to you if you did nothing wrong. So yeah, unfortunately, it's kind of a risk, but it's a risk with any protected category. So if you have someone who's male and female, you have somebody who's black and white, someone who's straight or gay, I mean, that's always going to be a risk that you're going to run with how the person perceived how they were denied.
And, you see that in sales too, with so many multiple offers.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see people saying like, how come they pick that person over me? Especially in this red hot market that we have. And sometimes realtors, some of you will call me and say, could I get sued for that or what? And that's to follow up with Jason's answer. I mean, anyone can sue anybody for anything. And it's not a pleasant experience to be named, whether in a complaint or as a defendant in a lawsuit. But that's it can happen. That's what the judicial process or administrative process is there to sort those out. So I think in the interest of your time, and I know we'd also and also the audience, I appreciate all of you joining us. I know some of you had to leave at 10 since that's what we promised. So I think if either one of you, Jason or Claribel, have any final words you'd like to say, I think we can close on that note. So anything else you'd like to mention or emphasize? Or
I just want to thank everyone for participating today. Just seeing by the participation, I can see there's a whole lot of landlords and realtors that are interested in knowing how the program works. And again, if you're ever thinking, I have a question about how does this program work? Was this true? Please reach out to any of the program staff at Rhode Island Housing or me, so that way we can clarify things, so that way we can move forward. And I'm hoping the source of income bill is going to make it much easier for our family. So thank you.
Indeed. Thank you for having us. I appreciate it. Thank you for all the questions. It's always my favorite part because I know I don't cover everything in the presentation, but I know questions always come out from left field, and I absolutely love them. So thank you very much. And the commission is always willing to do any kind of outreach or education. If you want us to come and tell you all the laws, including family status and military status and all that stuff, please contact me. We're more than willing to do that.
I think we'll actually be taking you up on that. So we continue to have questions with emotional support animals and assistance animals, and especially some burning issues like that, and families with children. A lot of questions about those.
Those are probably our two biggest categories that we have cases filed under.
Okay, great.
Yeah, those are pretty big issues.
Okay, well, thank you both for joining us, and I'll thank Sandi in absentia. And so watch for this video to be posted early next week, and I'll see if we can push all the information out to you in the meantime. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, Jason and Claribel, very much. We appreciate this.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everybody. Thanks.
Bye.